get a cool resolution out of this. So yeah, hopefully we have a healthy discussion about the topic we're going to be focusing on today. And what we're going to be talking about is we're proposing that amateur Olympic athlete compensation should be adjusted such that all amateur athletes be compensated fairly in Canada specifically.
So are these all amateur athletes that are going to participate in the Olympics? Like,
Yes.
so if it's a boxer that's already qualified.
For the Olympic team, yeah. But just to give you a little bit of something to work on, and the biggest difference between amateur and professional athletes is how much they're compensated.
Okay.
So a professional athlete is obviously compensated significantly more than an amateur athlete, and they also receive compensation from like sponsors in a variety of other forms other than.
Does Canada currently sponsor or compensate any athletes at all?
The government itself doesn't, but they can have their own like personal sponsors. But as it stands, the only way that Canadian athletes can be compensated is through a tiered system. So you either have to win a gold, silver, or bronze medal, and if you win a gold, it's 20,000. Silver, it's 10, I believe, or 15.
So they do get compensated.
Yeah, you have to win a medal. You have to win in the top 3.
And if you don't get your medal, you don't get
any compensation. That's what I'm saying. We're adjust the compensation so that they all be compensated fairly.
So when you say fairly, you mean on a performance base, or everyone gets $5,000?
Okay, we're not setting aside the $5,000. We're talking about sort of giving each one of them a livable salary to throughout their training periods. So something that they don't. So they don't have to have a full-time job that they're focusing.
Okay, so it's like
asking, is this a base salary besides any performance-based compensation?
Yeah. So
Sidney Crosby would get paid the exact same as someone who qualified last.
No, think of this as welfare for athletes, people who might necessarily win a medal, or even if they do win a medal, but they don't have time to work. So this program would be put in place welfare for people who don't have time to work because they have to practice for the next Olympics or whatever competition.
It's a bare minimum.
Yeah, and welfare. Welfare in the sense that you have to sort of qualify. There's certain criteria for you to be able to qualify for this program that's government mandated.
So I still answer my question. Everyone gets paid the same or not?
No.
Does
everyone get paid the same welfare? Not really.
Yeah,
it's case by case. How many kids do you have? What are you supporting? What is the welfare going to? How many hours are you training?
It would be an OSAP.
I'm not getting there's no I don't have a specific formula devised up for how they would do it, but we're saying the beginning of an implementation of this process or this program.
And this is just an Olympic athletes, so summer and winter.
Canadian.
Yeah, and we're specifically in Canada. Yeah.
But not that the debate needs to come down to small details, but obviously someone who goes and performs at a sport-specific world competition would also that those are Canadian athletes too.
Anybody that's on the Olympic.
Not necessarily Olympics, but
team.
For example
the national team.
Yeah,
right? The national team.
The country, the national championship.
And you get compensated for that too.
So Simon, if you go to the MX Nations and you're representing Canada, you're going to get this.
We're not just saying I registered, now I'm going to get a big chunk of cash. It's just you are one of the people that would qualify. That type of athlete would qualify.
Okay.
You can't just
If I qualified for the Pan Am Games, would I still get my base salary for the Olympics? Because a lot of people that qualify for the Pan Am Games, right, are going to be able to go to the Olympics or on this set Olympic team,
So anyone in the OHL would apply for this thing because all have the capabilities to represent Canada.
But they have to qualify for the Canadian national team or Olympic team, right?
It's not a world competition.
Yeah.
It's just a private.
I know, but I'm saying all those people have the potential to qualify for an Olympic team.
Yeah,
sure, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna.
They wouldn't qualify because those type of athletes that you need sponsors. Spitfire, who's pretty good, who's going to go play at World Juniors, could get a sponsor if he needed to, right?
As well as
but it's also he has to go and play for the World Juniors before he.
Yeah, that's the next question. Do they have to actually bring up some investment for Canadian?
Well, okay, pretend you are 15 and you're an athlete and you're training for whatever, and you qualify for this program. You have not registered in any tournaments yet. You're just registered. The government just knows okay, you're training to do this.
You're going to be getting your training.
And they go, okay, we're going to put you in the program. You qualify. Then 2 years down the line, there's a competition, you enter it. Somehow, you break your leg, you're no longer an athlete. Your welfare gets pulled, obviously, like, you're not qualified for this program anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's just like people who are going to go to these kind of competitions. We're just trying to describe the types of athlete that will qualify.
I think I needed to narrow the
You don't have to
contract
get into the Pan Am game or like a normal
Yeah.
tournament to do it. That's the type of athlete that would.
Yeah.
Is there any age restrictions on this funding? So you said someone 15. Is there any younger than 15?
Anybody that can qualify
For
for
the
the
Olympics.
national team can qualify.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So.
That's better.
And this, okay, so this makes sense. Yeah, that's okay. That's pretty much clear for me. So it's like if you know how there's like the world championships of running, like just everyone's doing like the 100-meter
Yeah.
sprint, right? I didn't make the Canadian team to go to the Olympics, but I made the team to represent the world championship. I'm
That's
eligible
the
for-
national team. Yeah.
Yeah, and I am eligible for that funding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know. Sorry, I was a little bit fuzzy when I said the Olympics because that's kind of where like the focus
And
of it is. But
Where would the majority of this money come from? Because it's gonna be a large investment.
it's like it's gonna be a government program. So the same thing, like the same way they get like welfare, right? Like
Would it be like sponsorship money too? So say Visa.
no, that's like up to the athlete specifically. So that's more of a personal relationship with their sponsors. Yeah.
Cut that out. We should just start when he said the thing, pause.
Yeah, but I wanted to hear the
Yeah, I think you think I should narrow the case construct a little bit, like to
Well,
be
no, it's
more.
definitely need tweaking.
Yeah.
But we're gonna know a lot more at the end of the round. I've already got some advice, but I really want to see how it plays out because it could change. It's really hard to tell if it's.
Like an easy case statement is just the amateur athletes training to do something on a world stage.
I'd say
Qualify for a
represent-
program that they can get welfare, so they don't have to.
Yeah.
So if you're the athlete that's training to do that kind
Yeah.
of thing, but you're too young, for example, it doesn't mean that you can't qualify for the program because the government obviously knows you're too young to get to that at that stage, but you
Yeah.
can still get the money, right?
I also think, I do think that this resolution is going to be a pretty big change.
Okay.
Right off the bat. But I want you to debate it exactly how it is, as good as you can, and we're going to see kind of how.
Okay, cool. You guys good?
Yep. Or
Just
How would I go? Okay, great. I hope you guys all cleared up now and you got a better idea of what the case is going to look like. Okay, so we're going to get right into this. First of all, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for inviting us up here to talk about and debate this case for the round. Thank you to my partner for helping me clarify all those points. And thank you to opposition for raising all those questions and helping me narrow down the case construct. All right, so we're going to jump right into it here. And our first independent point is going to be that this program, which is going to be government mandated, is really going to enable equal footing for competition. So when athletes, it's going to be sort of, by equal footing, I'm referring to equal opportunity for all citizens to sort of represent their country on a national level. So there's no longer, a financial wall in their way preventing them from being able to, compete on that level and represent their country. So this is going to sort of level the playing field in that sense. And secondly, the income itself should not be a prerequisite to being on sort of a national team or representing your country. So again, that's going to sort of, remove all those other roadblocks that would otherwise be in the way of athletes looking to go represent their country or pursue their passion, and compete in their specific sport or whatever discipline it may be in a competitive level. It also provides a pure form of competition, which is the basis on which the Olympics were found, and also the basis of competition on a national level. So what we're talking about is that, like I said, those hurdles or obstacles are no longer to be preventing people from being able to train and compete to the best of their ability, and it's going to enable these people to compete on that level on a professional level against the best athletes in the world, while at the same time them being at their best, their peak level, because they don't have other commitments that are restraining them. So it's going to sort of remove these shackles and kind of like I said, enable a more equal footing for them to be able to compete on. Now, our second independent point is that it fosters an incentive for these athletes to follow their passion and become either Olympic athletes or national athletes without the burden of financial struggle looming over the head, kind of reiterating what I was alluding to before. It's sort of, with this program being implemented, it would act as motivation for these athletes to be able to work harder, because now they know that they're not going to have to worry about, after training 7 hours during the day, they don't have to go to their, part-time or full-time job and work, another 7 or 8 hours that day. Like, they're going to be able to put their all into their training and, to become the best that they can be and compete on that level. So it's going to kind of break down that barrier and act as motivation. And then, this program will also help create professional athletes. So, like I said earlier, in the case construct, the distinction between the two is the way they're compensated. So this will allow athletes to, get sponsorships and be able to, sort of raise their income levels after, with the help of this program, to be able, when they get the sponsorships from these, companies that sort of will help them through and help them become professional athletes. It also reinforces the sort of libertarian ideals that Canada as a country and Canada's government upholds, i.e. its freedom to pursue, a passion or your dreams and whatnot. So it kind of reinforces those ideals that, our country is really based on or built upon. So that's another reinforcement to implementing this program. And another point to point out, we're not supplying, it's not going to be supplying the athletes with something like a doctor's salary. It's going to be supplying them with a livable salary. So it's not going to be something that the government can't afford, because the last Olympics that they had in 2014 in Sochi, Canada only sent 220 athletes to the Olympics. So, if you do the math, it's not like you're supplying welfare to a large portion of the country. It's just, supplying a small number of athletes with a livable salary. It also shows that the Canadian government endorses a healthy lifestyle, i.e. the achieving your peak physical condition, which is what you need to be in to compete on that professional and otherwise national level. Now, our third independent point is that Olympic athletes deserve to be compensated for representing their country as ambassadors at these either Olympics or national events, because that's essentially what they are. When they're representing a country, in face and in the quality of what they're putting forward. So when we sort of like I was talking about before, take away those barriers and sort of give them a motivation to compete at a higher level and to reach their peak physical condition and be the best that they can be, they kind of reserve the right to be compensated for that, acting as ambassadors for Canada as a country at these national events. And these athletes sort of become almost paragons of Canadian virtues, in the sense that they model determination and discipline, right? Because that's what your younger siblings or little young kids are going to look up to these athletes and see that they're pursuing their dreams and they're being the best they can be. Like, I remember when I saw Usain Bolt win the 100 meter when I was younger. I wish that, I was just thinking like, wow, I wish I was that fast. That's amazing that somebody can be that fast. And, this sort of enables that, in the sense that, these athletes will become those ideals for people to, strive to be better and be like them. Another point under that is that Canada's athletes are a source of Canadian pride. So when we win, regardless of whether we win, when we're competing on a national level and Canada comes up on the screen at a national event or the Olympics, they sort of, this is sort of a reciprocity aspect that they get compensated for representing the country in that sense. But you disagree?
Do you think Canadian teams are as prevalent as they should be in things like the World Cup, which we've done really good lately, the Winter Olympics and the Summer Olympics?
do I think they're not as prevalent? Yeah. I think they hold their own pretty well in these national events. So yeah, they're up there, representing us at these events, and they're, the whole world is looking at them. So they kind of, they're acting as ambassadors for the country. So again, that kind of just reinforces the point that they deserve to be sort of compensated for representing them on that level. And again, finally, you don't want to read about Canadian athletes who are struggling financially in the media to achieve their dreams, because it just gives an overall negative perception of Canadian athletes. So when we take away those barriers and those shackles that are restraining our athletes, it kind of it also amps up the country as a whole, like our athletic program on a national level, and makes us look better altogether. So for these reasons, we're happy to propose that the Canadian government implement a program that will allow these Olympic athletes to compete on those national and professional levels without financial struggle looming over their head.
All right, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his remarks. And now let's call upon the Leader of Opposition. Second constructive speech around no longer than 8 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Simon Rutzman. It's my partner, Ryan Colton. We represent the Odette School of Business, and we're excited to debate this case here. We think this is a super interesting case. We don't quite agree with it. Okay, we have 3 points here. Our first point is the competitive nature of sports. Our second point here is the economics of this proposal, and the third is the fake career options this is going to now impede in the Canadian market of the job market. Okay, first, it's the competitiveness of sports. Okay, this sporting in Canada now, if this gets implemented, is no longer competitive based. What that means is, right now we have teams that competitive based. What does that mean? That means right now it's basically just on who is the best, who's the best right now. But what this is gonna make it into is who has the potential right now. Because what happens right now is the best people who have, or let's give an example of hockey. The best people who are best at hockey get drafted and stuff like that. Okay, right? But now anyone who's the potential to get drafted at all gets this paycheck. And what that does is it takes away the competitiveness, because it turns into a career option, which we do not run, okay? Because this is now, I fucking hate this point. Okay, what this point does is this changes the competitiveness of the sport. People do not want to be a sports athlete to be competitive anymore. What they're doing is they're making it a job, okay? So this person now, instead of playing this game because they love it, they're playing this game because they're good at it. They're now just doing it because it's something they can do 9 to 5 that they can stand. They're doing it that they can. What they do is they can, because people who like working out, right? Ryan likes working out. He now has the opportunity to get paid to do that, because all he has to do is find a sport that he can play just a little bit better than the next guy, okay? He can BS it into badminton, into croquet, anything that Canada is represented. Because if Gov doesn't know, Canada is represented in so many sports. They even came up here and they were talking about how greatly Canada is represented as a country, okay? So we do not need this extra funding to fund every little person with a hope and a dream to become an athlete, because that's not what we need. Because this is what this thing does. It shows that if you have any kind of realistic ability or any realistic potential to representing Canada in any kind of way, you now are obligated to get this funding. And it's basically a no turn down, unless you are fat and suck at sports. Yeah, you can still be fat and still get this. So basically what they're doing is just paying people to work out. Alright, our second point here is the economics of the case, which kind of piggybacks on our first one. This is a huge amount of government funding that is being put onto this case. Because we talk about the acceptance rate of this case. Basically, you're just accepting anyone with a little bit of brawn and a little bit of a plan as to how they're going to try and represent Canada. Because this isn't just the money going to people who are going to represent Canada. They're going to all the people that have some kind of potential, or the people who say they are going to do that, but you disagree.
I think in the case contract, we narrowed it down that they are the people that are representing Canada, right? The people on the national teams, they are on the Canadian national team, you're representing Canada. Would you not agree with that?
To answer your question, as your partner said, if someone is 15, they show the potential to make the presidential team or the potential to be on or represent Canada, then they will get this funding, okay? So now, that kind of takes down your second point here because as a 15-year-old person, they are most likely paying it for fun, okay? They're not doing this to make a career out of it. As a 15-year-old, you're playing the sport because you have fun at it. No 15-year-old is really going to be like, oh, I can definitely make a job out of this, okay? That's not going to happen. And this leads on to our third point, is the fake career options. This is just going to be allow people to just go up there and be like, hey, like I like working out. I'm kind of okay at hockey. I can do this. Because like we all grew up in Canada. We know how many people here, know someone from high school who played hockey, right? And they were super into hockey, like, oh, I'm going straight to the O, boys, going straight to the O. And they didn't go straight to the O, okay? They went at some shitty farm team, and they made it nowhere, and they thought they were being boss because they were getting paid $50 a game or some shit. And we're out here in university actually getting a degree. We're trying to be members of society that we're going to one day come to a workforce. What all these guys are doing is they're going to go and they're not going to go to school because they're going to be worried about, I'm going to make it for Team Canada, I'm going to play rugby for Team Canada, stuff like that, okay? So they're not going to go to school, they're going to focus on stuff like that, and they're going to eventually wind up 25 with their funding cut because the government's going to be like, oh, there's no more realistic opportunities of you going to a tournament, so they're going to cut their funding. So this person has no job skills because they didn't give a fuck through high school. They didn't go to any post-secondary, so they have no job skills because they're too busy worrying about the gym. Now they have just a sweet, sweet buff body and no actual job application skills. And that's the second point on this case, is this false job options, is what they're going to do is they're not going to go to post-secondary anymore. Because right now what people want to do, if they're really good at sports, they go to post-secondary. Like people go play in the Windsor football team. That's not a good example. They're not so good. How about the girls' women's basketball team? If some girl's really good at hoops, what she's going to do is she's going to go to the Windsor basketball team. What she's going to do there, she's going to get some kind of degree, which is going to be able to both excel her in the future and excel her right now, because the university is going to definitely subsidize most of her education. But that's the key thing, she's getting an education. I'm going to go on to your point here. And you're saying this program will enable equal competition, okay? But it's not, though, because these people are going to get funding. Sure, they're going to get that 50 grand a year, whatever. But rich people are still going to be rich, and they're still going to be able to send their kids to fancy-ass schools. And the fancy-ass schools are going to have fancy-ass gyms, which is going to turn into a fancy-ass football player, okay? It just all keeps going and keeps going. This is going to equal out a little bit, but not enough to keep adding all this money, which you're going to have to put in, but you disagree.
Okay, number one, I don't know what a fancy-ass football player is, but by equal footing, would you not agree that it provides everyone with the same amount of, whether or not you have, enough money to spend on training, you still have the same amount of hours available, with this livable salary. You don't have another job that's tying you to something else. So you have the same amount of hours every single day as everyone else in the country to be able to train in your respective discipline, correct?
You do, though. Oh, sorry, no, you don't, though, because if that's the case, then everyone has 24 hours a day they want to study. To work out, and some might not have to have a part-time job, and some might have to. That's not what we're arguing. You come up here and you say we'll enable equal competition, and it won't. What happens, is because some people will have some funding, and some people will have a lot of funding, okay? That's not equal. Some and a lot is not equal, okay? So it's going to have a little bit of impact to the poor people, but most of the people here are still going to have an unequal amount of funding. Also, faster initiatives for someone to follow passion, and that just comes in our case of here of the false career options, and the amount of money the Canadian government is going to waste. Because, hell, who needs free tuition? No one wants that. We want to fund all these hockey players who aren't going to make it, okay? That's what we want to do as a Canadian government. And also, third, Olympic athletes deserve to be compensated for representing the country. They are, like people like Visa, people like Burton, people like Coca-Cola. They're big into that. They have all kinds of incentives from their sponsorships, because most of these guys are sponsored, and they do not need any more government money from the government, Canadian government, because it's just gonna be small potatoes for those guys. Okay, they stuff like that. So mainly, this case comes down to is we have so much, we can use this money to a larger utility investing in other things than every single kid who can kind of throw a football and that says he wants to be a pro athlete. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
What?
Alright, I'd like to thank the leader of opposition for South Park and call upon the member of government that's very constructive Mr. Brown. We're no longer taking this from secretary to year to year.
They can't. Because you can't do that. That's my
So it's so good to be back. First debate in about 6 months, I believe. So this is going to be very interesting. But I think everything's still rattling around in there, and I have him to pick up the slack where I lack. So let's get into this. I think there's a main RFD that comes to this round. They think they're missing on their side of the house. I think the impact on those who couldn't play sports otherwise without this program is being dropped on their side of the house. We mentioned that there are people that cannot afford to play sports. They have to work to play jobs. Like we use examples as to who would qualify for these programs, and they didn't give us a proper response as to why these people would still be able to play sports otherwise if they were coming from these poverty-stricken families, right? We want equal opportunity. A huge point that they didn't really address as much as they should have on their side of the house and didn't dedicate as much time was the fact that like those who are really good athletes but cannot play sports because they have to support their family, support them, they don't have access to maybe the equipment that they need to train properly, etc. All of these reasons, it gives these people and some kind of venue that they can play sports, right? We realize that like this program doesn't ensure that someone's going to get a gold medal, but it does ensure that they have the opportunity to get a gold medal. I think that's really huge on our side of the house. I don't think they're going to be able to pick up that RFD, and I think we're going to sweep it when we do our PMR. So I think that, let's get into their first point. Competitiveness of sports. No longer based on competition and who's the best. If you are an athlete, it does not matter how much you're being paid. It is about who is the best. It is about if you are better than the other person. You can say it all you want, but it doesn't matter how much money this person has. LeBron just wants to be the best. He could get paid $1 million less but have an extra ring. That's all he really cares about. But you disagree.
Why are most people getting this funding then, not the top 2% of all athletes?
Why are most people getting this funding?
Yeah.
I would not argue that most people are getting this funding. I would argue that a small minority, maybe 25%, I don't really know the numbers on this, that would be getting this, right? Who would qualify for this program? People who are under the poverty line. People who don't have anybody else in their family to support them. People who actually already have a job or, are coming out of school without a job and they have nothing else to do and they go, oh, I better get a job because I can't keep doing the sports thing. I don't have the money. Like, I can't keep going. So I think that these are the people that are being affected. Again, they're not analyzing these impacts on their side of the house on these people. These people now have an opportunity. We don't care about the rich people. They kept talking about a fancy school. I don't care about the rich guy who's going to pay for his son to be brought up in a facility and play whatever the hell sport he's good at, for years and years and years, paying millions of dollars, or go to a rich school with a fancy-ass gym and a fancy-ass coach. We think that these people are not relevant in this case. We do not care about the rich people that can already afford this. They will not qualify for this program, right? There's not enough money to live lavishly either. So the competition thing doesn't merit because it's not like living lavishly. This program doesn't exist, so then therefore you can live lavishly. You're still going to want to be better because you want to make more money. You want to win medals. You want to advance your career. The competitiveness is still there because without the competition, the sport doesn't exist. So therefore it has to be there. The competition will be very much a top driving force. They didn't warrant their arguments well enough to say why competition will go away. Yes, maybe some person has a little more money and they may be a little less driven, but they're still driven to win and they want to win. That's the whole point of sports. You need competition or sports can't exist. Second independent argument, economics. Huge amount of money, right? Accepting from anyone. We don't accept from anyone. There are qualifications. Not everyone gets welfare. You have to keep showing that you're getting interviews for a job. You have to have a certain amount of kids to get a certain amount of money. There's a lot of qualifications that you can have. We're not just accepting anyone. We already established that there are funds in places that we can take from to support this kind of thing, right? Canada is also not drastically in debt, right? This program might not work over in the United States, but here in Canada for Canadian athletes, there are huge amounts of tax dollars that we can use for these Canadian athletes, especially if it's just like another person on some form of welfare system. We already have these kind of programs in place, and the money is already there to feed these people. We think that we can transfer this over to sports just as easily, right? And they talked about, at 15, they were trying to use that example again to tear down our whole case. At 15, you would need to meet a lot of qualifications to get this funding, right? One, you would need to be an incredible athlete. Two, you would need to show that you're not doing anything else in life. You're not also trying to become a lawyer, right? There was a lot of things that you can do, and maybe they go, yeah, we do want to support this 15-year-old kid because he is going to go, he's going to be the next,
Why, Michael Phelps. Why can't I think of a name? Even though he's American. But you disagree.
This 15-year-old sounds like a pretty big hotshot. Do you not think sports companies would be targeting this guy to sponsor him because he's so good?
What if they can't sponsor him because he has to stop playing, but he has to work, right? Like, what if, like, at 15, sports companies are way less likely to fund a 15-year-old than the government is for some kind of welfare program, right? Why would they have to do that if the government can fund this for them, right? Why not wait until, that's the reason Scouts exist, is so they can watch people not have to fund them until they actually meet the age that they can use them, then start funding them, right? This is what happens with athletes. That's how scouting works. They scout these guys in high school, and then they don't get them until they actually start playing sports, right? There's also a lot of laws with companies trying to give money to kids. So, like, the thing that you say, like, oh, well, companies can just fund them. It's not that simple. Like, there's a lot of laws for giving money to students who are going to play, like, basketball or who are in high school and stuff like that. So we think, again, a Canadian supported program would be the most sensible thing here, right? Their third point was fake career options, that now people are going to think they can play sports even though they can't. Man, I'm not going to go try to become a professional basketball player just because this program comes out. I really like playing basketball. Does it mean that I'm going to go to the NBA just because this program is now here, that I think this delusional I can make just enough money to get by, right? Like, that's not sensible. These are not lavish amounts of money. These are not amounts of money that you would want to live on. This is amounts of money that you want to start to live on and work your way up as an athlete, right? This is the building blocks that are going to help them to get there if they're that good of an athlete. And if not, then they're not going to be playing professional sports. This fake career options thing, even if I wanted to do something, then fuck it. Like, let them do it. It does not mean that they're going to get funding. If they want to try to be a professional athlete, they can. We are the determinants of who gets funding and who doesn't. And if you don't meet those qualifications because A, you're not a good enough athlete, or B, you're not poor enough, or C, you're too rich, whatever it is, then you won't get that. Let's move on, Case. First independent argument we give you is equality. Equal footing for athletes. I think this is very sensible. I think most of the case comes down to this. I think that they didn't respond to this properly by talking about, like, kids going to fancy-ass schools with fancy-ass gyms and all of these other things. And I think that it does not matter about fancy-ass schools and fancy-ass gyms. We're talking about those who need it and couldn't otherwise play sports because they have to support their families, support themselves, etc. Again, a lot of arguments on Opside aren't analyzed or are just completely dropped because they keep saying, like, well, if they're good, they'll make it, whatever, who cares? Like, if you're rich, then you don't qualify. Like, I've said it a million times, but it keeps coming back in every independent argument they bring up, that certain people are going to qualify that shouldn't. We're going to be wasting money. Years are going to go by thinking people are athletes and they're not. I mean, that is not how this program can work. They're just trying to pick at straws to make sure that their whole case try to implodes on itself, but really they're not doing a great job. Second independent argument, they didn't address well enough incentive. We think it motivates athletes. I think the main thing that they didn't analyze in this thing is what is the impact on Canadian sports and government, right? We think that this is great PR for the government if you are now even more supporting your athletes. Not only are you, like, setting them on the world stage, but, like, you could be the country that got them there, right? Like, without our program, they couldn't have made it and got, like, a bronze or a silver, right? So we think that the impact on Canadian sports and national sports in any kind of global competition is going to look great on Canada and increase that Canadian pride we were talking about. We think the incentive is there for athletes, and it creates a better sports program and a better national team as a result. And we think, and a third independent argument was that they deserve it, right? We think that they have earned some kind of program like this as they are putting in their time and effort. And a lot of these people do not get paid by the government, or they don't win a medal. They come, like, fourth place, and they don't get that little bonus for playing, but they devoted the last, like, 4 years of their life to train for it. So we think that they do deserve some kind of program, right? For representing their country and to increase Canadian pride. They POI'd and they tried to say, like, does the Canadian team do well? Regardless if you say yes or no, I think it's even better if we say no, they don't do well at soccer, then maybe this program should exist so we can make the soccer team better and increase Canadian pride and increase the amount of money and funding we get from those teams. We think that this program solves that issue of whether or not they're good or not, because if they're good, then whatever, but if they're bad, then maybe we can get better soccer players or whatever teams are shitty and get them up and use this funding in this program to get them on our team and make our team better. They talked about there's Visa and MasterCard programs. I had the rebuttal for this written down before they even talked about it. The impact on Canada, sorry, I'm skipping a point. Yeah, Visa, MasterCard programs, but the smaller programs do exist. This is not enough to support them in the long run. We think that athletes need more, and there's not enough athletes being supported by these programs. And the impact on Canada when they win is large enough that this program should exist just to get better Canadian athletes on the team and make us better.
That's the thing about the government is that in March now we're no longer the name of race. Here.
I can go even without Josh here. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Jacob, for bringing this pretty cool case. I like sports, so it's good dealing with a sports case. Thank you, Simon, for coming up here and making points. One of the first things that I'm going to come up here and that I was thinking over here, all athletes want to go, like a lot of Canadian athletes want their education paid for, and that's going to the U.S. This program will not allow Canadian athletes to participate in NCAA sports because this makes them ineligible because they've received benefits before going to, they're called professional athletes now. So if I want to be a track star in the U.S., I cannot do that. I cannot play basketball for any NCAA team. I cannot play football for NCAA team. I cannot run for any NCAA team. I can't do anything because I'm not an eligible athlete because I'm considered a professional athlete as soon as I receive benefits to play a sport. So that limits all NCAA eligibility for people that want to compete for Canada. And that is one of the biggest things here on this case, and that should tear down these points right here. So your first point, you come up here and say this is going to enable equal competition. So equal competition is, you said, like when someone's 15. But when my partner Simon came up here and said that like you find promise, or sorry, they said when you find promise like in a kid who's 15, well actually these kids are going to be training from when they're 9 to 12, and you're saying that you're going to be coming up here and giving people this opportunity to train, but you won't be giving this opportunity to train because at a young age, these kids are going to be sent to camp, like Gary Roberts training camp for these OHL kids. You're still going to be seeing these rich kids receiving this, not these impoverished kids, because there's going to be a lot of like camps and money these parents are giving to their kids already to be trained, not these impoverished kids like you guys say are going to help, because these camps are like going like luge or something. That's a very expensive sport, or basketball. They're going to be sending these kids to basketball camps. People on welfare cannot send their kids to basketball camps, cannot send these kids to the top training already. So does this enable equal competition? This enables equal competition for kids who've already been trained at a young age. Sure, you might have your one underdog that comes out through here, but your point really drops here is because you're saying kids who are like 8 or 9 are going to be getting that need this training right away at these specific camps to become better athletes, like a basketball camp or any type of camp to represent Canada, like running, track, is people who have a lot of money will be sending these kids to camps at an early age. And then another one is foster an incentive to like their passion. This comes to our point with the fake career paths too, is sure you want to follow your passion, but you should follow your passion to an extent. Can you truly make a career out of being a Canadian rower? I don't know if you can truly do that. I say, like we said, is maybe we should implement something like what the OHL does. For every year you represented, so every year you played in the OHL, you get 1 year of Canadian schooling paid for. So maybe every year you represent Canada, you could get a year of schooling paid for. Something like that instead of actually paying these athletes, because this way would provide incentives to go to school instead of incentives to actually just go and follow their passions. And like we said, please sit down. This motivates athletes to train, like just to train, not perform. Like where we said is like perform to try to get first place. This will give the athletes like the $20,000. This is a money incentive to train and perform to get to first place. This motivates, yes.
Okay, so you just admitted that our side of the case is right, that there should be some funding provided to athletes. You just don't agree the way that we're doing it.
Yeah, there shouldn't, like what we said with the status quo that was left before, and you said you're going to change the status quo. So the status quo is for $20,000, $10,000, or whatever. We're just saying that keep the status quo. The status quo is the ability to perform. Let these people perform to the best of their ability. And then on to your third point is these Olympic athletes deserve to be compensated for representing our country. What about other people who represent our country in a different way, academically, something else? These are all ambassadors of our country. So, like, shouldn't these people be represented too in case, like, if we're saying that all these athletes are ambassadors and they deserve to be represented? Yes.
Do you know if those other ambassadors are compensated?
Well, I'm saying, do you know that either? Like, should we have this happen?
Is that really relevant to this case? Though?
Well, I'm just saying that maybe since they're ambassadors, shouldn't every Canadian ambassador have some sort of helping? Because that's what's happening. Isn't it equal, right? Everybody has to be equal. So another thing. So now coming back to our side of the case, and what I think we have right now is one of these things is what will provide a better future for these athletes? Will this money, giving them money at the beginning and say, hey man, like you're good at rowing, like we're going to pay you all the way through these years, and then when your rowing career is done, well, you don't have an education, you only have skills in rowing, what are you going to do? You have a high school degree, like, I don't know what you're going to do now. Not many people are going to sponsor a rower out of his prime. I don't think that's going to happen. So they should provide an opportunity to find new jobs, or something, just a different opportunity. So now, like what we said is, in our first point is the competitive nature. We're saying that at the status quo, it provides a competitive nature. It makes these athletes want to compete for first place, makes them want to compete to get to top 3. This makes them just want to compete just to get to Team Canada. Sure, they want to get the gold medal, but this provides an extra incentive for these people to compete, extra incentive for these people to try harder. And I think that's one of the big things here is why the status quo is actually pretty good, is because it does provide an opportunity for athletes like to do the best, and it makes athletes want to perform. And then on to our second point now is the economics of this case. Is when they come up here, is they say that anybody who has a promise or anybody who, like, so 15 years old, if he's really good at skiing, he will get this money. But why are we going to do, like, so there's going to be so many prodigies. You hear about so many soccer prodigies, football prodigies, any type of prodigy. You hear about these guys, and a lot of them fizzle out. A lot of them fizzle out right away. So are you going to be getting a return on your investment for this? I don't think so. You won't be getting, this person won't be, like, giving you a return on your investment all the time. Like, so that's what they're saying. This acceptance rate is so wide, and there's so many athletes. He said he came up here and it was like 240 athletes got sent to the games last year, but you said every national team. So there's so many more Canadian national runners that are accepted on the diamond circuit opposed to like what that actually go to the Olympics. You actually have to qualify, and then swimming too. Swimming's a huge sport too, where people like make the not Paralympic team, but Pan Am team, but don't make it to the Olympic team. It's different things like that. And I believe that these athletes like that's a really large amount of athletes to be compensated. And finally, when we come down here, is our third point. I think this is one of our biggest points of the round, is the fake career paths. Is like we said, is that it limits NCAA eligibility. These athletes cannot participate in NCAA like college sports. This cannot happen because they are now they're now paid professionals. So now this is going to be making an athlete weigh his opportunity. Should I go try to represent my country and be in this Olympic training, or should I go work on my education and get a 4-year degree from a school and maybe represent my country in another way? I think that way is a lot better instead of this way, which is limiting kids from being able to being able to go to the U.S. It's like, it's either do I do my education or do I represent my country? And I think that's something that's going to be providing them with fake career paths, because even if you are with the NCAA, you can still make it to Team Canada. Like Andre DeGrasse, who won all the stuff, he's a USC Trojan right now. So I think these are major ways. And like we said, another way is maybe do it the OHL way. Every way you represent Canada, or every time you represent Canada, you get so much of your schooling paid off. And then finally, another thing is how many of these athletes are actually going to turn into like professional athletes when you're done? It's like these careers aren't that long. So you're not going to be providing these athletes with the skill. You're not going to be paying for their schooling. Like they're not going to be in school because they're going to be training and they're going to be representing your country. So for these reasons are why we are proud to propose this idea and leave the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Ryan, for coming up here. Thank you all for trying your best. Okay, well, I'm just going to jump right into it here. The Canadian government is a business. Okay, like most business, they make investments, whether that be a Trans-Canada pipeline, whether that be a Trans-Canada highway, stuff like that. They make investments. Okay, and this is going to be one of the, if it goes through, historic, terrible investments. This is like investing in Nortel just before they collapse. Okay, this is just gonna be the world's shittiest investment, and this is why. Okay, the main reason it's gonna be a shitty investment is because it's gonna get no return. Canada is already one of the, definitely one of the biggest countries represented at the Winter Olympics, stuff like that. Okay, so Canada, like Op said, the government came up here and said that we are already represented very well. Okay, these people are finishing great. We've got lots of gold medals to our names. Okay, Canada doesn't have an issue right now of not have a strong national spirit. We have a great national spirit. And this isn't going to be the solution to fix that, okay? Because this is such a huge investment, a lot of these athletes get funding. Like Dan so happily pointed out to me in Case Construct, Motocross the Nations. You guys don't know what that is. I know what that is. It's a huge motocross meeting all over the world. Happens once a year. All these teams go, right? And like you can imagine, that'd be super expensive sending all these bikes over. But hey, don't worry about it. These guys are getting a solid paycheck to help them do that. And these guys are already pro athletes because it's an amateur contest. They're representing Canada. They get the funding. This also covers any kind of hockey. Okay, hockey, like Canada represents hockey like 15 and up, right? That's 15 under. 16 under, 17 under, all the way up to like 25, okay? That's just the amount of people that would qualify for this funding. It's just way too amount. There'd be almost more people, never mind. There's just a shit ton of people that do not need this funding or are getting this funding. The core clashes in government's case here. This is what they're arguing for. Their main point here is equality, and that's just not what this case is going to provide. This case isn't going to make an equal playing field for everyone. Okay, this case is going to give, it's going to throw a bone to some people starving and just give more money to the rich people. It's just going to give more money to the people with the funds and the funds to do this, make this possible. And one of the main kind of things that made this case super hard was the fogginess in who got this funding. Gov did not come up here and present a accurate description of who get the funding. It was just super foggy. They said anyone who would represent or anyone who deem potential to represent Canada would get this funding, which equates into so many people, which is just too many athletes to handle. And also, another huge fault on Gov's side is the amount of people that will actually see this as a career option. I'm not saying the smart kids won't do it, but I'm saying the dumb kids will do it. They'll be like, hey, I get paid to work out. I'm going to do this. I'm going to fake badminton. I can do it. I can fake synchronized swimming. Okay? And they came up and they tried to give some clashes in our op round. They said, this is the thing we were fighting for, was the economics of this proposal, that the investment is not going to be, this is just not going to give out anything that, it's not going to be worth, the investment is not going to be worth it. That's all I can say. This money be going to better colleges, better publicly funded programs, bigger gyms, and local recreation parks where these athletes can train and practice. Okay, so I'm just going to dive into my crystallization questions here. Is there a difference between a career and a hobby? And Ops' new proposals making that super, super cloudy. People are not going to know when their fun stops and their life actually starts, when the career actually starts. Because these people's careers, athletes only are athletes until about 25 or 28, and then they have to find new jobs, okay? So that's going to be a huge problem. And then what's better for athletes? Right now in the status quo, our athletes go to post-secondary to get an education as well as play the sport that they love to play. And if they get drafted, so have it. They're good athletes. They should get drafted. If not, they have some kind of education they can fall back on, and that's a huge part in the status quo, which we're going to keep fighting for, is that because of the way it happens right now, they have some kind of education they can fall back on and be a part of society, not just fall into this hump when they turn 28 and not figure out what they want to do. Because of those reasons, we are happy to propose. Thank you very much.
Can I borrow your phone again, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is it 5 minutes? 30 seconds.
5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate you for listening to our debate, and thank you again, Ob, for coming up in here and trying to point out some flaws on our side of the debate. And thank you to my partner for bringing up some valid points and throwing away their POIs in most of their case. So, what I'm going to do is boil this case down to 2 RFDs that myself and my partner found throughout the entire case. Now, the first one is whether or not there should be some sort of compensation or some sort of option for these athletes to be compensated for what they're doing. And OP essentially conceded to these points when they offered an alternative or said that there are alternative methods to providing these athletes with compensation. They said that when they had the POI and they asked, when they were up here and my partner raised the POI as to whether, and they brought up the point of alternatives, and then he asked if they were just wanted to know if there are other ways for compensating the athletes, and they said yes. So right off the bat, we won the first POI or the first RFD for that reason. But I'm just going to sort of hammer home some other points that sort of reinforces whether or not there should be options for these athletes to be compensated for their training. And that was, again, in the points that we brought up earlier in the round, which was that there should be an equal opportunity for all athletes to be able to compete at the top level of their field or their discipline, and this sort of allowing them or giving them options to be able to suit it to their lifestyle, whichever option they choose, whichever alternative op can put forward or that we put forward instead of this program, will allow them to compete at the top of their game and become allow them to achieve their peak physical ability and become the best that they can be. So again, that sort of reinforces the point that whether or not there should be options available for these athletes. And again, there was sort of the incentive aspect that these options act as motivation for the athletes to work harder. Like I've come up here and said that the rich kids and everything, and all those type of people that don't have the issue of funding are not going to be, they're not even going to be impacted by this at all. And we're not focusing on that. The round was sort of focused on people who would sort of qualify along the same lines of welfare. People who can't support, like my partner was pointing out earlier, people who wouldn't be able to support their family or themselves otherwise. These rich kids and everybody else, the rich families, are concerned. They can do it regardless of this program, and that's why that sort of takes away from that equal opportunity. And that's why we're talking about implementing these alternatives or these options for these athletes to be able to pursue in order to, like I said, pursue their passions and become the best that they can be and compete on a professional level and win on a professional level. Now the second RFD boils down to will this program essentially help Canadian athletes become better and represent our country to the best of their ability, represent our country better than if they were struggling financially or if they were struggling to find time to practice or become better in their respective disciplines. And the answer is yes, that this does essentially help them get better in their respective disciplines, because like I said, it's number one, the incentive or the motivation that this is offering is not only a financial motivation, but also it's freeing up time and it's allowing them to have more time to practice and put more effort into their training and becoming better at what they're in their respective disciplines or whatever it is they do. And also the sense that they are ambassadors for Canada. They are representing Canada on a national level. They interact with athletes from other countries, and so when they are representing us on that level, us as Canadian citizens want them to be able to represent us, fairly and give Canada a better image. So in that sense, it also kind of incentive in that sense as well, as they want to kind of represent Canada better, not only themselves better, but Canada better as a whole, because when they perform better as athletes, then they will be giving Canada a better image in terms of maybe their athletic programs, or the way Canada supports its athletes. So when you look at this round holistically and what it kind of boils down to, you can see that kind of dropped or conceded to some of our points, and it kind of reflected back in our case when my partner came up here and hit these points home, that it doesn't take away from the competitive nature. Like Bob was saying, it creates more of a competitive nature in the athletes, because it enables more training ability and whatnot for the athletes, and it creates a career option for them, without having to worry about financial struggles or other issues like that. And for those reasons, for those clashes in the round, we believe that us as the government proposing this case were successful in winning the resolution. Here, thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for coming. I'd like to call upon both sides.
I'm gonna fake shakes because I'm really actually sick.
Oh, you're sick.
I'm like really sick.
Using my
The
phone.
whole time, why am my nose stuffy?
I can tell you drinking water.
I feel sinus nighttime. That shit is so.
I don't. It's locked.
We're just repping this.
Yeah, George, your laptop.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna get feedback actually when this video is posted. I'm just gonna put it at that because I gotta go. I can't spend 20 minutes like I usually do. I'm sure you've got stuff.
Yeah, are we heading back to the roof?
Yeah, I want this. There's a lot of changes I want to make in this case. There's a lot of feedback that I have. I will type it all up.
Too broad.
No, there's too many weird.
That's what I mean. It's broad.
Yeah, it just went in all different tangents. I guess broad is a good way.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, there's too many arguments that were brought to the table. Some of them didn't matter, but it's like someone addressed.
Oh, it's like